Hello, you'll see the notable absence of the panel and also a change in attire, and the reason for this is today I'm back alone in the studio after all the hoo-ha we made about the importance of reporting and that the entire act is fashioned around the facilitation of receipt and transmission of reports to the Financial Action Task Force. We completely forgot on the day when we shot the videos to make the section on reporting. So this is what I will be doing today. All right, before we get into the reporting, just by way of a quick summary, simply because I don't think that you can hear it enough, we can hear it enough, the main obligations that an accountable institution incurs in terms of the FICA Act is to register with the FIC. And by the way, this slide is copyright and courtesy of the Financial Intelligence Center. So it's registration with the FIC. You must draft a risk management and compliance program. You must appoint a compliance officer who undertakes and accepts responsibility for the implementation of compliance, although the accountability stays with the owners or directors of the business. You must ensure that you train all of your employees. You must keep records of your transactions and all your customer due diligence activities, and you must perform customer due diligence and risk rating, all of which are designed to help you to identify instances where reports must be made and to actually make those reports. Broadly speaking, I think that it would be easier if we divided or categorized the types of reports that you must make into three categories. The first category we could describe as a threshold category, and that would then include cash amounts which exceed the threshold, which is 49,999 Rand and 99 cents, which must be reported. And also included in this category would be international fund transfers, typically in the form of EFTs, which exceed a maximum set in the regulation. And at the moment, that maximum has been set as 19,999 Rand and 99 cents. In both instances, with regards to threshold-related transactions that you must report, you must bear in mind that you have to report these within 3 days from the date on which you became aware or ought to have become aware of that transaction. I dwell here briefly on the requirement of reporting, not only when you become aware, but when you ought to have become aware. So if you don't implement sufficient controls in your business to enable you to identify these transactions within 3 days of their occurrence, that in itself is also a compliance failure and may attract a financial penalty. So it is a little bit of a double-edged sword, the requirement to report when you ought to have become aware of it. The second category of reports we can probably describe as the reports which relate to terrorist financing activities, whether you are doing or whether you have been approached by someone whose name appears on a list which contains the names of terrorists or persons against whom targeted financial sanctions have been imposed, or persons who are regarded to be involved in the proliferation of weapons of mass destruction. These reports are typically made in terms of Section 28A of the FICA or Section 26A of the FICA, and we will return to those in a short bit. And then the last main category would be the category of transactions or activities which you, given your corporate wisdom and experience, should reasonably regard to be suspicious. It's worth mentioning here that in the past, the requirement was for you to report a suspicious transaction, which would imply that the transaction had to be completed before reporting needed to happen. And how many people avoided this quite onerous reporting obligation was simply to choose not to do the transaction. So Section 29, which deals with this aspect, has been amended, and it is wide enough now to include not only transactions but also activities. Right, let's unpack the Section 28 cash threshold transaction reporting obligation. I'm not going to bore you with my voice in reading everything that you can read for yourself on the screen. I simply want to highlight one or two pertinent aspects. The first of which is that it is not, the report needs to be made not only when you receive payment in cash above 49,999 Rand, but also when you make payment to anyone in cash above that threshold amount. With regards to the property associated with terrorist and related activities and financial sanctions reporting obligations, I have not much else to add to this. Safe to say that the challenging aspect with regards to this reporting is when you are required to have identified or ought to have identified not only the names of your clients who may appear on the lists, but also when you suspect that the clients may be dealing in property that is used to fund terrorist activities. That is quite an onerous obligation, and I think necessary for for an approach which takes some care and a proper and decent narrative and description in your RMCP. Okay. I'm just giving you a second or two to assimilate the rest of the section. International remissions is actually part of the cash threshold, or the threshold transactions to which I've referred earlier. And there are two of those. The one in Section 30 deals with conveyance of cash to and from the Republic, and at the date of this recording has not been enacted, and what I mean by that is that the Minister has not published the threshold amount in the Government Gazette yet by way of regulation. The most recent amendment deals in Section 31 with electronic transfers of money to or from the Republic, and the amount was set at 19,999. I have not been able to find the specific reference into this, the aspect that I want to raise in writing at the moment. I am mentioning it to you here simply because I attended a webinar hosted by the FICA yesterday on the 24th or 25th of April 2023, where the comment was made that this requirement applies only to specific accountable institutions such as forex traders, banks, those institutions that are authorized to deal in forex, foreign currency. And then the last set of reporting obligations are the suspicious and unusual transactions and activities. And what is worth noting here is that the obligation does not only rest on you as an accountable institution to make these reports, but it also rests on any person who carries on a business or is in charge of or manages a business, or who is employed by a business, who knows or ought reasonably to have known or suspected, etc., that there would be suspicious or unusual activities or transactions taking place. So this is a very, very wide requirement, not only applicable to accountable institutions. If you are an employee, you are not in charge of the business, but you suspect that something untoward is busy happening, you will discharge your duty in terms of this Section 29 if you inform your superior, and provided that then in the accountable institution there are adequate controls in place to make sure that your concern is dealt with and reported. If you do not have those controls in place and processes in place in the business, and you are not sure that the report is going to eventually end up with the FIC, then it would be much safer to go to the website and go AML and make that report yourself. A point worth mentioning on this page is that people who are unduly aggressive in respect of taxation, so people who try to evade tax rather than legitimately avoid tax, must also be regarded as potentially suspicious, and these must be reported under Section 29.